All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're calling in from. I hope you can hear me clearly. My name is Cindy Sagoe. I am the program coordinator for the National American Indian Alaska Native Prevention Technology Transfer Center. I'm sorry I'm not on video right now. My internet's a little glitchy, so I'm trying to make sure that my sound is clear. So thank you for joining us this Friday. Great to see some of the familiar faces and some new faces and names out there. Today we will be collaborating as usual with our sister center, the SAMHSA Tribal TTA Center, to talk about suicide prevention awareness in our communities. I'll just go briefly through these introductory slides. So a little bit about our center. We, the National American Indian Alaska Native PTTC, is a program funded by SAMHSA. We are part of the PTTC network, which has 10 regional centers and 3 national centers, including ours, the National Hispanic and Latino PTTC, and our National Coordinating Office, our Network Coordinating Office in Kansas City. And although our programs are sponsored by SAMHSA, this does not necessarily, the content of this training and session does not necessarily represent the thoughts of SAMHSA or the center. So after this, if there are any slides or resources shared, we will send it out to all those who attended. We would also have a recording of the session up on our YouTube page and our website. You can still, we'll have a follow-up email with our GIPRA link. So please fill out our evaluation survey. And also that would also include information about how to request CEUs for this session. And so although we are gathered here virtually, we would like to take some time to acknowledge the land that we all live on. We'd like to take the time to pay respect to the indigenous nations whose homelands were forcefully taken over and inhabited. Past and present, we want to honor the land itself and the people who have been stewards throughout the generations. So please take some time to read through this our land acknowledgement that was developed by members of our team. Ella and Kelly Driscoll, who are sisters, and Sean Bear, who's co-director for our center. We also have it posted on our website. If you'd like to, if you're not able to finish reading it, we have it on our website, or you can also send me an email to share it with you. Thank you. And so I will be handing over to our speakers for today. We have Gary Newman, Hunter Jr., and Joshua, who will be leading our session. So I'll be handing over to Joshua, and he will help us with Hunter to start us off in a good way. Thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Before we get into introducing ourselves and the team here, I wanted to take a second and pass it over to my colleague Hunter. If you could start us off in a good way, we'll come back and introduce the team. So I'll pass it over to Hunter.
All right, awesome. Can everyone hear me okay? I don't know if it was just Cindy's audio or if that's all of ours that are talking.
Hunter, I think it was just Cindy, so you're coming in clear for me.
Okay, all right, awesome, thank you. Ani Minagujgut, Gusa Ninin Adijnakas, Wabajan Shido, them Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and Didda, Minwa, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Doljaba. Kachimagwashka Bijik, Mom P. Schwa, not quick, long goal. Just wanted to welcome everyone, and so we're gonna kind of engage you right away. I'm gonna open up in a good way. I'm gonna share a song. And as I'm sharing the song, what we're gonna ask everyone that can hear me at this time to go ahead and let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, maybe what your role or responsibility in your position that you're working at, because we also want to get a better feel for who's in the room and what your role or responsibilities are back to our Indigenous relatives across Turtle Island here. So when I start that song, if you can go ahead and do that in the chat box, we would really, really appreciate that. Jimmy, go ahead. I'm a little too loud, I apologize, but I know Josh is a little hard of hearing, so I gotta sing a little louder for him.
All right, thanks. So thanks for getting us started here with that song on Friday. So I'll start off with introductions and pass it over to my colleague here, Gary. But my name is Josh Schuyler. I live just outside of Detroit, raised here and been here for most of my youth and adult life. So I've been supporting Indian country for 10 plus years, I guess, professionally. Privileged to work with Gary, Hunter, and several others on the team supporting requests that come in from the SAMHSA Tribal Training and Technical Assistance Center. So I'm stepping in here today for my brother Don, who was leading this call, but I'm going to be kind of the moderator, asking questions, monitoring the chat, and passing information over to Hunter and Gary, and hopefully you all with questions that you may have. So I see a lot of people from across Indian country, some First Nations people, California, all over. So thanks for joining us. So I'll pass it over to Gary to introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. It's especially good to see some of my Alaska colleagues here from Fairbanks Native Association, Kenaitze, and Tyonek. And I'm Gary Newman. I'm a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe from the Flathead Reservation in Montana. I live in Anchorage. I've been here now 6 years working with the Native Connections projects and the SAMHSA Technical Assistance Center. And it's been an honor to be part of these webinars over the last several months, sharing information about what we're doing in our communities related to wellness. Turn it over to my colleague, Hunter.
Yeah, ani everyone. Kinagoya, Kachimagweshka BGX Shkwana quick. Just wanted to welcome all of our relatives here across Turtle Island. It's kind of funny. Before all of you came on, I said, well, how many people do you think will get on this? Oh, about 15. So I just wanted to, this is awesome. And I recognize some of the names that we worked with before. I'm Ojibwe and Odawa, joining you from the state of Michigan. And our language, just for those of you that love language, there's actually two interpretations of Michigan. So if we say Michigan, that actually means turtle, which would make sense, right? The state of Michigan is surrounded by the 5 Great Lakes. But another interpretation of that is Chizagi Gun, which actually means a great or big lake, which would also make sense. So I just kind of wanted to share that because oftentimes, you hear in Indian country, that culture is prevention. And, so I like to take the opportunity to share that language. But I've been kind of working in native wellness and the behavioral health fields for about 30 plus years, urban, rural, and reservation tribal settings. So I have a real love for prevention, the community prevention work. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that because I know many of you have that same start, on your path to where you are now. So I just want to acknowledge all of you that are doing the awesome native wellness work for our relatives, for our nephews and nieces in Indian country. And I'll be sharing a little bit more later. So thank you for joining us today. Turn it back over to my brother Josh here.
All right. Thanks, Hunter. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone, for sharing in the chat. So we want to get started here. We wanted to make sure that we have some prompt questions, but if you have a question that comes up during this time, feel free to put it in the chat or jump on and ask, and we'll do our best to make sure that we do the best we can with the time that we have. The topic today is suicide prevention, but we're hoping that we're able to share and create a space where, Hunter can share his expertise, Gary, and also if people have questions or things to add on in the chat, that we do a good job of creating that space for the work that we do. So we put our heads together, we have some prompts, and I can jump into those here to get us started. So one question we wanted to start off with, and I'll go to Gary first and then over to Hunter if he has anything to add, was, how do you approach the topic of suicide or suicide prevention in tribal communities or communities across the states in Alaska, Gary?
That's a good question. And I know that when programs get new funding and they get new staff that might be identified as Native Connections or someone that's working on a suicide prevention project, it's an important question. And if we in our communities understand first and foremost that suicide is preventable. If we understand that and we understand the role that community members can play, then I believe many lives can be saved. There is a publication called To Live to See the Great Day That Dawns. And we've shared that several times on these calls. And I think we could probably send it out to participants as well. Hunter's holding up a copy of it. It was developed in 2010 for American Indians and Alaska Natives, specifically addressing suicide. One of the things that has happened in some of the communities I work here in Alaska, they put up a sign that says suicide spoken here. And that gives people permission in the community to talk about suicide with people. The other is that there might need to be a ceremony in the communities asking permission to even say the word suicide. There are so many different, cultural ways around talking about suicide, and we want to make sure that we understand what those are in the communities. And in the prevention guide, it also talks about some of the barriers and some of the myths around suicide. And I think that's one of the important things. We've done webinars, and just going through that prevention manual suicide guide, you'll really find some tips on how to begin the suicide conversation in your communities. Some of you might have tips as well that you might be willing to share. What are your thoughts, Hunter?
Hey, thanks, Gary. Well, I just want to say, first of all, and I'll take it just a little bit from a different angle, and this is where Gary and I bring sort of that balance to this topic. You know, I know that when we're supporting, for instance, say like Native Connections, SAMHSA grantees, or the SAMHSA TTA Center with a lot of the TA work that we do in Indian country with GONAs and a lot of other community trainings. I think one of the things that I always say that, you know, look at me not as an expert, but as a relative that has gone through some, either trauma, or a family has gone through trauma, or community, but also that resilience, that balance. You know, one of the things that, you know, I'm a fully licensed master's clinical social worker. And, you know, one of the things that I remind people is that it wasn't the licensure or the degree that made me who I am. It was my culture, my Anishinaabe, my beliefs, my teachings, those ceremonies, those songs that helped to, you know, bring healing, you know, not just in my own life, but, you know, apparently to others as well. So when people kind of see me that way, when we go into the communities, and not as, you know, an expert from the government or, you know, like that, because we know that some of those historical policies still have a grip on a lot of our communities today. And so when we're able to acknowledge that in a good way, and when I say that, it's not to be stuck in the trauma, but is to acknowledge that, because one of the things that I've noticed when I've done a lot of the community trainings, you know, I'll ask, you know, the 30 or 40 or 100 participants in the room, you know, how many of you have collectively gathered to really address historical trauma in your community? And I will really be amazed that there isn't really a lot of show of hands. And I bring that up because one of the things that I was told by a friend of mine was that, well, everybody has gone through historical trauma. They already know what it is. Everyone's experienced it. And although I may agree, one of the things I've noticed, though, as communities, we have not collectively come together to address it from a resilience and strengths perspective. You know, and I think when we can do that, when we can acknowledge that in a good way, then I think we start to build those relationships in tribal communities. They might be more receptive to receiving, some of the curriculums and the trainings, that we can do towards community capacity building and nation building in our communities. And I agree with Gary, the more information that we can arm our relatives, not necessarily directors and prevention and program staff, although that's very important, but all of our community members, our peers, so that when youth might be struggling, they're going to probably reach out to a friend. So how do we assist in the community capacity building among those peers, those youth, younger adults, our elders, because we know that we have a lot of elders that are raising our grandchildren in our community. So we really have to put our prevention efforts in suicide to the whole community. So that's a great question, Josh. I appreciate you asking that, and happy to follow Gary's wisdom there.
Excellent.
I just wanted to add to that working in our communities, I totally agree with Hunter. What we have learned is that we're really the first generation to talk about historical trauma. When you think about it, 20 years ago, communities weren't talking about the historical trauma. And I think that comes from a trauma-informed approach. And if we take a trauma-informed approach on all of the work that we do, and when I say that, to put it simple, it's not about what's wrong with you, it's about what happened to you. And if we have a conversation using the words in our communities about what happened to you, it opens up new doors. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, and Gary, if I could just add on to that, is a lot of our colleagues, in Native wellness people in the country are using the term resilience informed, and even, resilience informed is, which I think has a different tone to it, right? Because instead of coming from a place of trauma, we're coming from a place of resilience. And, one of the things that we know, as many of us on this call descend from our ancestors who prayed for us, that went through some very, very hard times, very difficult circumstances. And, is that they would hope that we become strong enough from a place of resilience to address these issues in a good way, in a healthy way. So I think we're really starting to see that happen a lot in Indian country. So I just wanted to add to that. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Hunter. And that kind of leads us right into protective factors. When I work in communities, I'll ask the question, what protective factors do you have in your community that can help the community and our youth with some things that will keep them away from substance abuse or harming themselves? And they start out by saying, well, we really don't have any. But when you dig into that further and you talk about particular communities here in Alaska, subsistence activities, taking individuals out hunting moose or caribou, or taking youth to a cultural site and having them clean up in the spring. Those are protective factors that help individuals in the community veer away from negative behaviors. So communities have got them, and they just need to honor them and talk about them, and maybe even put them up on a chart that these are our protective factors in our community. Talking circles. Some communities that I've worked in have talking circles. Those are protective factors. And you may know some other protective factors. If you do, just list them in the chat.
Excellent. Hunter, a comment real quick, but I want to go to the chat. Josh B had Gary, what you touched on is having talking circles in the community. Sometimes they don't work with everyone's schedules or no one shows up. I bet by a show of hands here, everyone on the call who's working in Indian country have experienced that. A couple things I've seen along the lines of protective factors and getting back kind of the first question is if you're new to a community, sometimes it can be challenging. I worked in my own community and, was young and was looking for, I knew some things, but still people reached out to me to help kind of guide me. Hey, here's the things that we do, or here's kind of some of the cultural things that we share that maybe were aligned with the way I was taught, or maybe was a little bit different. And I've been in communities and worked where I've seen it both ways, where people didn't know if it was okay to go to a talking circle. So maybe an elder or someone from a program said, hey, you should come to this. You're a part of our team, or you're new to the team. So sometimes there is a little bit of maybe anxiety or fear of the unknown for participating in a lot of things that we have going on. Obviously, many times they're opened up to the community if we're having conversations about trauma or things that are working in the community. Those are a couple things that I've seen work in communities for new people or new teams, or even teams that have been together for a minute. But I want to go over to the Hunter to touch on like some examples of protective factors, or what are some of the things you've seen with communities that you've been engaged with?
Yeah. And I'll share a little bit of a personal story that I think a lot of people can relate to. And this really connects to the question that you asked, because, when I was younger and I grew up in an urban setting in Grand Rapids, it's really easy as a young Native person to kind of get lost, because I went to a public school that, quite honestly, I think I was like the only Native person there. And everybody would kind of look to me in the classroom when it came to topics and the subjects, which actually made it kind of uncomfortable, because what they were teaching in history and social studies just wasn't very good stuff. And as many people know, it's hard to get that stuff out of those books, which can trigger trauma again, and for those that have our cultural stories and our historical stories passed down through our generations. But when I was a young boy and I grew up in a single parent family, and I remember going to my first powwow, right? And this was on the banks of the Grand River at Riverside Park. And I remember I really wanted to go out there, but I was also kind of like scared to go into that powwow circle, right? And because there's like all these people outside the circle, and they're just like looking at you, it's publicly attended event, And so I remember I had to ask my older brother, if he would take me out there, and he did. And when I went into the circle, I would hear the singer singing, and that in our language we say dewag, that drum, the heartbeat of our people, our community. And I would say right then and there is like my spirit really got touched by that dewag and that drum. But had it not been for somebody that I trusted to take and felt safe with to take me out in that circle, and I say that because think about our own communities that we work with. Not all of our young people may have that safety or those mentors or those people in place that we used to have, in our traditional societies and communities and clans, but he made it safe. And it would be a few years after when that same drum, those men, they invited me to sit down and start to learn how to sing and drum and I share that because a lot of times people think, well, if we just send out an email, we send out a flyer and we post it, people are gonna come. And that's not gonna, we know that we have a lot of our people who struggle with anxiety or depression in social settings. And, not every one of us have, confidence just to show up when we don't necessarily know anybody or with someone that we trust and feel safe with. And I think when we're delivering, you know, programs or prevention activities, you know, we really need to think about those individuals that, like myself, who wouldn't respond necessarily to a flyer, wouldn't respond to an email, or, you know, it might take a friend that I feel safe with and trust to go along with them to attend something to get my confidence and feel that safety. And so I think that's why, you know, when we do like GONAs, Gathering of Native Americans, or gatherings of Alaskan Natives, you know, when we do things like that, and it really we start with the belonging. I mean, when you think about it, the ones who created that curriculum were very wise, because they understood that not everyone felt like they belonged in our communities or felt safe. So much have happened to our people that breaking up kind of the traditional families or traditional community structures really is the reason why we have that belonging focus, so we can create that safety, that trust, you know, that, you know, so that we can start to find that balance and start that, you know, maybe that healing process in our life, you know. So when we go to tribal communities and work with our own people, even though I'm an Anishinaabe and Ojibwe and Odawa, you know, if I'm going to a different tribe, you know, I'm still a guest, you know, and I don't ever come in as the expert, you know. And we talk about what is cultural humility. What does that mean? You know, when we talk about understanding that, you know, that's why when we did this, opened up here with that song, we had everyone tell us who you are. Where are you calling in from? What do you do? It's really about building that relationship and that trust first, so that we could start off in a good way and you know, have a little taste of, you know, feeling like I'm welcomed here, I belong. And then we can start doing the prevention implementation of whether it's suicide or well-variety circles or language, you know, drum making, you know, whatever it might be, you know. So we really emphasize that, and you know, we leave our ego at the door, leave those credentials at the door. You have to be able to get down and in the circle and just be a part of the circle when we come into communities and present or facilitate or train. So so I just wanted to share that. And Gary, if you have any additional thoughts.
I just wanted to say thank you, Sean, for talking about these need to be tribal specific. And I remember when the GONA was first developed in 1993. The GONA, there were 13 American Indian Alaska Native that came together to develop what is the Gathering of Native Americans. And it's been revised here in Alaska for the Gathering of Alaska Natives. But the most important thing I remember was that all of those that developed said, this just comes from us, the 13 of us. This is what we have learned, and this is what we want to share. It isn't the be all end all. The idea is that communities would experience a 3 or a 4 day GONA, and then the community themselves would take that curriculum and make it their own and put in their own cultural iterations and their own ceremonies and their own belonging and their own creation stories and make it their own. And that's what I like about it, is it's a guide, it's just a template. But for communities to make it work, they really need to take it and make it their own, like Sean is saying, because we all are so different.
Yeah. And I think that really speaks to, like, when we go to communities, we're not the experts. So when we do these community trainings and facilitation, we're asking for their cultural experts in their community to help us every day. And we honor and we acknowledge their wisdom from their community. not come in as the experts or the saviors or anything like that. It's not like that at all. So I appreciate Gary sharing that. You know, one other, I'm just remembering this past summer, we did this kind of a QPR training, this question, persuade, and refer training. And it was for a community out in the Plains area. And there was an elder there who does a lot of training around their specific tribal communities' wellness and beliefs. So we were really able to collaborate, and she did such an awesome job in complementing that QPR training and surrounding that with culture, traditions, and teachings that help support the QPR training that was being done for that specific tribal community that day. So that's just another example of, you know, if I'm Ojibwe, I'm not going to go to, you know, the Dene or the Kiowas or the another community and start doing my beliefs or teachings to them. No, we're going to invite their experts to help us to make it their own. And they still come away with the knowledge and the wisdom and the skills, both from their own culture, but also from whatever curriculum that's being shared that day. So there's another example of in an approach that we often, you know, how we approach working with communities, you know. So thanks, Gary, for sharing your wisdom, and I'll turn it back to Josh.
All right, I want to go to the chat here because we have some questions, you know, that we had dialed up, but the chat's been pretty active with suggestions, and we've done a good job of you know, monitoring it. But there's one that just came across for Gary and Hunter is, what tips do you have for people that work with multiple tribes, especially in urban areas? Let me go to Gary first, and then Hunter on the back end.
All right.
In just thinking about the Alaska Native Heritage Center, who is one of the Native Connection grantees here in Anchorage, you know, it's an urban setting, but they work with individuals from villages all over the state of Alaska. So they have to be mindful of the individuals they work with, that it's not just a one size fits all. Like Hunter was saying, each individual community has their own traditions, has their own values sometimes that may be a little different. And it's acknowledging those. And the important thing is, if you're in an urban setting, if you do activities, making individuals feel like they belong. We know that's the first level of Agona, is the belonging. You spend a whole day sometimes just making the community and people that come feel like they belong at this activity. And once you have a sense of belonging, or a child that is a newborn, if they don't know where they belong or how they belong, then there are some very risky things. Gangs, for example, they know how to make our youth feel like they belong. So we need to focus on belonging with our youth and with our communities. And in urban settings, that's one of the important things too, is let everyone know they belong at the table or at the circle or at the gathering. That's one of the first steps, I think, that's very, very important.
Yeah, I love this question because, and I know Josh, he's in an urban setting also, and I, you know, first started doing community-based prevention, alcohol, tobacco, and other drug prevention with our community youth in an urban setting. So we had tribes from all over Michigan represented in that urban community, and other tribes outside of Michigan. So, but we just recently, a couple months ago, right, Josh, we was in Nebraska. We did a Gona in an urban setting. And we had Santee Sioux, we had Ponkas, we had Winnebagos, we had Omahas. I mean, we had a lot of different tribes represented there. And, you know, and some were in a residential program, and some were community members. And what I would say to the question that I believe was Marlin who asked that is, we made room for all of them. We didn't just single out one specific tribe, in their culture, teachings, or beliefs, but we invited all of them to, and this was a Gona, and all of them to go ahead and have the opportunity in that circle to share and express themselves, and made room for that. Because a lot of us have been excluded, a lot of things, because of our teachings or beliefs, or just, not feeling like we fit in. So we definitely want to make sure that when we have a community of a lot of different tribes, a lot of different nations, that we make everyone feel comfortable. And again, we invite the members of that community to take an active role and a leading role if they're comfortable with that. We don't ever want to put anyone on the spot or have anyone feel embarrassed or anything like that. Some just like to participate. They don't necessarily want to be called on or put on the spot. One of the things I've noticed, like, for instance, with Gonas is that, a lot of our people, one of the things we know that with historical trauma is it kind of took that joyful identity away from a lot of our people to learn how to play and have fun. And so when a lot of people are used to going to trainings and just sit in front of a presenter all day in a PowerPoint in a kind of a conference style, when they go to a Gona, they're like, oh, this is not what I expected. And it can be a little uncomfortable at first because we're asking them to move and to do silly things or play games, and you can always tell, the ones that are like, they're uncomfortable, but, we're able to work with them and help them feel like they belong too. So, but I think this all ties into to suicide and the topic of suicide prevention, because really the key is how do we reach those within our tribal communities that don't normally attend trainings or those kinds of workshops or trainings, and really I think the key is, how do you make them feel like they belong and that their voice matters, and how do we reach them in multiple ways? Who else can we invite to the circle that can help us to reach them, that they trust and that they feel like can help them feel safe, so I think those are all keys that whether they're youth or adults or elders, that's really important to get people to come. We had a colleague of mine out in the Dakotas area who attended, and Josh, you're aware of this, they were hosting a family healing camp. And this colleague of ours was invited to that healing camp. I mean, they were holding ceremonies, every night, but he was invited to do QPR training within their setting, so that they could reach maybe our traditional people who may or may not attend maybe a training that was done in a building with walls and chairs behind one another, behind tables. So I think we have to really look at the way that we're delivering our prevention, and can we deliver those in their setting that they feel most comfortable in, instead of having them adapt to ours, because we're trying to force things that may not work. And so, so I just kind of want to express that, take a look at, if it's not working, take a look at how we're channeling and trying to reach our relatives, our nephews and nieces, so thank you. I'll turn it back to Josh.
Josh,
Yep.
can I just add that the Gona, the gathering of Native Americans or the gathering of Alaska Natives, is one of the culture and practice-based interventions that is happening in our communities. And although SAMHSA supports it and has information about it on their website, it was developed by American Indians and Alaska Natives. It was not developed by SAMHSA. SAMHSA supports it, and we know it works in our communities. But I just wanted to add that it is one of those cultural and practice-based interventions that we're finding works in our communities.
Excellent. Thanks, Gary. And thanks everyone for working in the chat and sharing information. So just to keep us on track here, we have about 15 or so minutes. So wanted to jump into Hunter and Gary. So I'll go to the Hunter here first, but so you all have worked with communities with Native Connections projects. So what have you seen communities do in terms of prevention, suicide prevention? I guess I'll just go there to Hunter.
Can I just start by saying, Catherine Van Valkenburg asked, as a non-native, would I be welcome at Agona or Agoan? Absolutely. Sorry, Hunter.
Oh, no, that's good. I saw that question and I was like, no, I'm just kidding. We always, you know what, we love our allies, we love our friends, and we all need to help. It's everybody's responsibility to help, you know, so I would answer that question, you know, that way. You know, and at the same time, when we're working with that local GONA or GOAN planning committee, you know, we always, you know, again, they're the experts and we're coming in as to help them guide to have a successful GONA. So I think that's the other part of that question too, is, you know, who are your allies and friends, and how do we help them feel comfortable coming to a GONA or a GOAN? Yeah, Josh, you know what, we work with so many tribes and tribal communities, as well as everybody that's here on the call, and you know, we have some tribal grantees that prefer to use QPR, some that prefer to use Assist, some prefer to use Safe Talk. You know, some prefer to, you know, whatever, you know, sources of strength, you know, and different approaches. And I really believe that, you know, sometimes I'll hear is that, well, a lot of those aren't culturally, you know, appropriate, or, you know, things like that. And you know, and we even hear about, you know, maybe that with the community readiness model when we're talking about assessments, you know. And the thing about it is that when I have the opportunity to have a conversation with those individuals, we're able to find ways and balance to bring the culture into, you know, whether it's a QPR or Assist or Safe Talk or, you know, any one of those trainings and more that I haven't mentioned. But you know, and so, you know, we find ways to make it safe and comfortable. And we want to make sure that the community, they own that project, like they own that training, like they're in the driver's seat, not us. You know, how can we help you to make it feel safer for everyone that's going to be coming, to feel like, you know, hey, you're a part of the solution. You know, we need everybody here to fasten their seatbelts and not sit on the sidelines, but to get involved, you know. So, you know, I think, you know, just really honoring that local community's wisdom and knowledge is going to be the key to successful and sustainable. And I would just want to emphasize that word, sustainable prevention planning, you know. So Gary, what are your thoughts?
What was the question?
Yeah, no problem, Gary. But it was talking about what things have you seen communities do, you know, Native Connections and other ones you support in terms of prevention programming for suicide prevention?
Well, up in Alaska, since I've worked closely with Alaska Villages, you know, doing the GOANs and the community readiness and understanding the importance of of getting a handle on where your community is and how ready are they to do this work, and then what strategies go with that. Because some grants, for example, will be funded, and then all of a sudden they start doing activities and they're spending money and they're doing this and they're doing this. But with the Native Connections program, the first year is kind of a planning where you lay the foundation and you understand who your partners are, you understand your community and who should be invited to the table and who's not invited to the table, and maybe inviting them. And then that community readiness of understanding how ready is your community to do this work, because leadership may have a different readiness level than program people. The bottom line is the community itself is going to be the one that will tell you the truth. I just added the spirit, honor, and inclusion information. We can share that newsletter with you. We developed it this year, and it focuses on our two-spirit relatives throughout the country.
Hey, thanks, Gary. And for those of you too, Hunter put the title to the book, and there's some information you can download through SAMHSA on GONA, the book that was talked about early in the conversation. So a few links to be able to, or at least prompts to be able to find some of the resources that we have available or spoke about today. So we have a few minutes here monitoring the chat, and thanks Sean and everybody, Josh, who've been participating. And then just a comment from Sean is talking about working in communities. So I'll try to paraphrase here, that not everything aligns with Indigenous beliefs, and that if we're going to help our communities, we need to have our traditions, our beliefs and practice, and help to understand those, to help with historical trauma in the communities, PTSD and suicide. So I appreciate that comment. And, we've talked about a lot of things here, not 100% directly suicide prevention, but all the work that we do, and Gary and Hunter, you can probably agree or add on here that everything we do, it could be community wellness, it could be talking circles, language, all those things are protective factors. And if we get requests to support communities, GONA has been something we've used as an example. It can address multiple issues, not just suicide prevention, but specifically suicide prevention, data collection, wellness, substance abuse, the whole gamut. So just these are templates, as Gary said, to help us work in communities and do work in the communities. So just wanted to acknowledge the comments and point that out.
Yeah, it's interesting, Josh. In the town I live in, I live about 2 miles from Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding Schools. That's a federal Indian boarding schools that both my grandparents attended, and then my brother and sister attended one in northern Michigan called Holy Childhood Missionary Indian Boarding School. And a lot of people, when they don't understand the history, because a lot of it is not taught in public education, and then they hear about it, and then kind of the response is, well, that happened a long time ago. And the thing is, I grew up with my grandparents, I grew up with my brother and sister. It didn't happen a long time ago. But the point I'm trying to make is that when we have that understanding about why we might be seeing in our Indigenous communities and families higher rates of social detriments, whether it be depression, anxiety, substance misuse, and diabetes and things like that, when you really start to understand our history, and not from what you learn necessarily in public history books, but from the community, then we can really take a look at what sort of cultural reaffirming approaches can we look at when we're going to be implementing suicide prevention efforts, or it could be substance misuse, or whatever it is that we're trying to, mental health, access to mental health. There's still a lot of stigma around mental health, and asking for help, so I just kind of wanted to mention that, because I know that there are a lot of relatives on here who also have had family that went to boarding schools. And now we're seeing that Acknowledgement on a bigger level where their Department of Interior has authorized to take a look at how many of our children have not been found yet, and the amount of tragedy that has happened in America. So when we can talk about those things in a good way, in a safe way, I think that we can really, especially in our communities, not to be stuck in the trauma, but so that we can get and transcend the trauma and get to the healing. I think then we'll see some really good, more awesome work. More awesome work than we're already seeing, and we're seeing a lot of awesome work as we work with a lot of these tribal grantees. So I want to acknowledge everybody that's on this call. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for looking out for our nephews and nieces across Turtle Island, our relatives. We really appreciate that. And so I just kind of wanted to share that message.
Right. So I know we're coming up here short on time, and a couple of things I see in the chat is we need to do this again and we need more time. And that's it makes me feel good here on a Friday. But as it always is in the work that we do, we have the time set aside. So I just wanted to make sure that people were monitoring the chat. I know a evaluation link was sent out. We know how important that is for the work that we do and to continue to do this stuff. So if you didn't see it, please take a second to look at that. Lastly here, I've got a couple minutes left. I wanted to just share some words of encouragement, as Hunter already kicked us off with. We often don't have enough time for self-care. We get stuck in the conversation. So we've worked in communities, as Hunter said. I appreciate everything that everyone's doing, everyone participating, knowing there's resources out there to help us, but to be mindful and take time, whether it's this weekend, this afternoon, at night, have those support systems. We do it internally. I try my best to check in, but even, as Hunter has done, reach out, hey, let's have a chat. Let's talk about, the day and things that are going on, to be able to put things in perspective. So having good people around you is always a great thing to do this great work. And there's a lot of great people on here. So I just wanted to kind of share that, that way of taking care of yourself, and thank everyone for jumping on. But I'll go to Gary if you want to share some words of encouragement with everyone before we wrap up for the day.
When I work in communities, I know before I got sober 33 years ago, I would leave an activity or an event or a room sometimes, and I would always remember the bad things about the people. But in the work that I've done in the last 33 years and the healing and wellness work, I leave gatherings and I leave webinars knowing good things about people. And I've learned some good things about all of you today. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate everyone. I'll pass it back to Cindy and the team if you have anything else for us here in the remaining, couple minutes.
Someone asked, what's Turtle Island? Hunter.
We have such a deep reverent, revere. I guess we have such a love and deep appreciation for our Ogoshnanake, our Mother Earth, that when I reference Turtle Island, it's really everything that's beneath all of our feet, and that we are connected, that we are related. And I really feel that, when we can heal the earth, we're also going to heal the people, because we've understood that in order to live healthy, that we are truly living in balance. And what's happening, that we're seeing with climate change and everything else, is the unbalance. And it's really been kind of a historical clash of cultural values, in terms of how we are to live, Minobimadze, so when I refer to Turtle Island, I'll just say that look beneath your feet, you're standing on it, and we're all connected through it, so when we have that understanding and approach in life, we'll take a lot more care in decisions and choices that we're making, to live on it, and try to be more in partnership with it, so I hope that answers your question, Arthur. Was there anything else I was supposed to answer?
Oh, I think that's our time, Hunter. So Cindy.
All right, thank you so much. I think that was a great way to end in a good way. Thank you so much, Joshua, Hunter, and Gary, and everyone who shared their time and their knowledge today. We're so grateful that you spent today with us and leaving us all filled with good thoughts and, good ways to help our communities. We look forward to everyone sometime next month. We will send out a follow-up. A lot of resources were shared in the chat, and we'll try to include all of those. And if it's okay with Gary, Hunter, and Josh, we would also send their emails for anyone who would like to reach out and have any follow-up questions. So thank you so much and have a great day and weekend. We'll see you soon.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.